Okay, so welcome. Thank you all for joining. This is our first public webinar as the Muslim Network for Positive Impact. Today we'll be hosting GiveDirectly. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Like I say, if you can keep your camera on, it'll be much appreciated. The structure is going to be, well, I'm going to give a short introduction to who we are at the Muslim Network for Positive Impact. Then we're going to have a talk by Mufti Harun on the importance of informed evidence-based high-impact servitude. Then we'll be passing it on to Waleed, who'll be talking about the effectiveness of unconditional cash transfers. He's from GiveDirectly in the US. And then we'll be giving out to Muhammad Ghazi. He's on the ground in Yemen, and he'll be talking about the on-the-ground impact of GiveDirectly's initiative. And then we're going to try and maximize our question and answer time as well. So yeah, I'm just going to let a few more people in. If the other hosts can see the participants, you can just let them in for me. Right, so quick introduction to who we are at the Muslim Network of Positive Impact. We're a group of diverse Muslims from all around the world, different Islamic perspectives, different academic professions, and who basically come together noting the discourse on the current state of charity. We've seen that a lot of attempts to do good often end up doing more harm than good. And the likes of Robert Lupton have written about this in his book on toxic charity. And more than this, we see that even the attempts to do good that do good aren't nearly as effective as the best attempts to do good. That's one issue, and there's a lot of literature around this. The second thing is there also seems to be a lack of evidence and careful reasoning before going into any initiative. It seems to be, when you're doing good, good intentions are enough. And that's not to say that intentions aren't important. They are. We have the hadith also that that actions are by their intentions. But not negating that, if we really want to be sincere in this, that doesn't negate that, those intentions shouldn't be informed. And that, we have a whole section in the Hadith collection Bukhari on knowledge before action. So we can have good intentions, but for those intentions to really be sincere, they need to be informed, especially when we're dealing with making an impact that affects other people's lives. This is not just, hukuk, the rights of Allah, but the rights of hukuk al-ibad, the rights of our fellow creation. So this is really the issue that we're trying to deal with at the Muslim Network of Positive Impact, is looking at how can we address this problem? How do we, based on knowledge, evidence, and reason, and divine guidance, understandings of doing good throughout the Islamic intellectual history, how can we make sure we're really maximizing the positive impact of our servitude? And how do we make sure that's grounded, really in evidence and reason? Now, it's a simple question to put together. How do we have a huge impact that's grounded in evidence and reason? But it's often very difficult to answer. What does it mean to have an impact? What exactly do we want to improve in other people's lives? Once we've decided that, how do we measure that impact? How do we measure that improvement? So what we want to do here at the Muslim Network for Positive Impact is discuss these things at both a meta and a practical level, answering these meta questions of what does it mean to have an impact? How do we measure that impact? And at a practical level, looking at organizations like GiveDirectly, who we're hosting today, to see how, based on certain assumptions of what it means to be an impact and how we should measure that impact, how can we practically act on those assumptions? And specifically at the Muslim Network for Positive Impact, how we differ from other attempts to do this is to make sure our knowledge and epistemology is grounded in the Islamic intellectual history to try and answer these questions. But yeah, that's just a very short introduction to who we are and what we do. I see Mufti Harun is here now, and I'm going to give it to him, over to him. Just a short introduction to Mufti Harun. Mufti Harun has a very extensive bio, studying all over the world. He started his studies at the Darul Uloom in South Africa. He then moved to Al-Azhar University for 10 years before going on to graduate as a Mufti in Pakistan, and then coming back to South Africa and continuing his studies at the University of the Western Cape and the University of Cape Town. Yeah, I'll give it up to Mufti Harun.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Education is the most powerful tool that you can use to change the world. In Allah's name do I begin, traces peace, blessings and salutations be upon His beloved and our beloved Prophet, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rabbana zidna ilma wa rizqna fahma. O Allah, increase our knowledge and grant us understanding. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. I would like to firstly take this opportunity to thank the Muslim Network for Positive Impact and GiveDirectly for this engagement, where we're going to explore some of the potential of high impact, evidence-based zakat distribution through unconditional cash transfers to Yemeni families. You know, once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to appoint a qadi and a judge in Yemen. So he decided to get Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. And he said, "Oh Mu'adh, how would you judge the people when you're in Yemen?" So he said, "First I will look in the book of Allah." And then the Prophet said, "How else if you don't find it in the book of Allah?" So he said, "I'll act upon the way and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam." The Prophet said, "What if you don't find it in the book of Allah or in my way, in the sunnah?" So then he said, "Ajtahid, I will exert my reasoning, sound reasoning, and I won't go off balance." So then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Alhamdulillah, I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing the messenger of Allah." So this is a very important story to start off with, because it shows us how evidence is taken. Now, zakah is a very important pillar of Islam, right? And we must know this is a very limited resource at our disposal. Now, are we using it to our full potential or not? And if we don't use it to the full potential, are we reaching the objective of the Sharia to make sure that we can sustain our social, spiritual, political demands of the day? So this is the question we need to ask ourselves. And if we take heed, we'll realize that there can be new perspectives, there's new tools, new ways of understanding how to have financial development or sustainable financial development with our zakah money. So we must use it very strategically. Now there's various modes, okay? You'll get a mode where we say investments, let's invest money and we can do it. Or someone else would say, let's teach people skills. And another person would say, let's create job opportunities. There's multiple ways. But today's topic, what I'm going to speak about is the importance of ensuring when we do ibadah and servitude to Allah, we must do it based on the strongest evidence. We must do it on sound reasoning, and we must do it where it can have the highest impact, right? And this is GiveDirectly what they are doing. They're trying to look at it from the highest impact on poverty areas, on poor areas. How does it alleviate and remove poverty from there? By giving unconditional cash transfers. How does that work? And what is their evidence? They're looking at empirical studies, looking at what's happening on the ground. And by that, they show that there is great benefit. So this approach is a different approach, but very beneficial, because it deals with lived experience. It deals with real life things happening on the ground. It's connecting the objective of the Sharia to what's happening on the ground. So like us in Cape Town, we have the Cape Town Ulama Board and the CTIEC, the Cape Town Islamic Educational Center. We also have a welfare section where we deal with people on the ground. So from this, it's something where we can empathize and we know what is happening. So when you deal with people on the ground, what is our policy? Our policy is number one, aqwa dalil, the strongest evidence, right? Whether it is aqli or naqli, whether it is from the aql and the intellect, or if it's from the books, but the strongest evidence. So meaning whether it's transmitted knowledge or it is empirical knowledge. But we look at the strongest evidence, number one. And number two, أيسر للدافع. What is easier for the giver? وأنفع للآخذ. And what is most beneficial for the recipient. So the benefactor, what's easy for him. And for the beneficiary, what's easier for them and more beneficial for them. And where did we come up with this? You know, there's a nice hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, may Allah illuminate the face of that servant who listens to my message and he carries my message and he memorizes it and he understands the message. Because you get two types of people. Someone carries the message without understanding it, and the other person, one person transmits it, but the one who receives it understands it better. And this is where we're going to show our evidence. Now, evidence works in many ways, many interpretations. So we say we follow the Quran, the Sunnah, the Ijma, the Hadith. But let me show you with 3 examples of the Quran, of Sayyidina Umar and how he built policy. So Umar radiallahu anhu, Allah says in the Quran, if someone steals, their hand must be cut off. Umar radiallahu anhu, he puts a moratorium on that, a stop on that, right, in a certain year. Then the second example, Allah says you can do Hajj Tamattu, Hajj and Umrah together. Umar radiallahu anhu prohibits that. And then Allah speaks of Mu'allafatul Qulub in Zakat, which is connected to our topic. And Umar radiallahu anhu says, this group and category doesn't need a sheikh. Now, apparently, if you just look at this, what you're going to say? Umar radiallahu anhu, he went against the Quran. But no, he understood the Quran on the practical level. He understood the Quran on what was happening on the ground. So in line with the Quran, he acted upon. Because Quran cannot be understood on an island. It cannot be understood isolated in a vacuum. It's understood in the context, what's happening. So the first thing for the moratorium, because people were stealing out of need and it was a famine and a drought. The second one, he saw it's better than all the Muslims crowding. It's better if they do the Hajj separate and the Umrah separate. And he saw in the third, Mu'allafatul Qulub was paid for 3 reasons. One reason was for a religious reason, where they were trying to invite people to Islam. The second reason was for a socio-economic reason, where people were Muslims, so to strengthen the poor Muslims. And the third was for political reasons, where they were paying to get protection tax. So he saw this is not needed in his time anymore. So he said, okay, this category will not get money, we should not give there. So meaning, he acted upon the Quran, but according to the practicality. Now same with the Sunnah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when it came to Udhiyah, for the slaughtering of the animals, first he prohibited you to keep it for more than 3 days. But then he said, in the next year, he said, whoever wants to store it more than 3 days, you are more than welcome. Because in the previous year, we were suffering. There wasn't enough food for the people. So that's why you weren't allowed to keep it more than 3 days. But now you can keep it. So there's always wisdom. But if we don't understand the Quran and the Sunnah with wisdom, we'll make big mistakes and there'll be a ramification. Let me give you an example. Say, for example, today is Saturday and it's the 29th of Ramadan, right? But don't fight with me. I know we're only in the first week. Just for example, if you're on the 29th of Ramadan and the Prophet used to go out to sight the moon on the 29th of Ramadan. But now imagine the moon is only born tomorrow, early morning tomorrow. Now people will still go out. They'll say, no, but the Sunnah says we must go out, you know, on the 29th. That's not the Sunnah. The Hadith say go out on the 29th. The Sunnah is the lived practice. If the Prophet knew the moon is born tomorrow, he'll only go tomorrow. He won't go out with all his people tonight. So the lived practice of the Prophet is the Sunnah and the documentation is the Hadith. Now why I'm bringing the difference between Sunnah and Hadith? Because I want to go on to lived reality again. Once, Abu Yusuf, even Yahya bin Ma'in, he was a very stern and strong scholar. But he said Abu Yusuf, he is a person who is Sahibul Sunnah wa Sahibul Hadith. He is the one who follows the Sunnah and the Hadith. Meaning, he takes the written documentation of the Prophet's statement and he understands it according to the lived reality. Now what happened? He goes to Medina. And in Medina, he has a liter. Say, for example, we're talking of the Sa'a is a measuring container. So in Iraq, the measuring container, for example, is 1.5 liters. And in Medina, it's 1 liter. It's a smaller measuring cup. So he asked Imam Malik, why are you using this 1 liter cup when it had to be 1.5 liters? Imam Malik said, come tomorrow. Come tomorrow, I will show you. And he had 40 people lined up. And each person came with a cup which was equal to 1 liter. And the second person and third person until 40. And they all said they got it from the fathers or the uncle or the cousin who lived in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what did Imam Malik do here? Empirically, he proved what was happening on the ground. Yes, you maybe have a narration, you maybe have a calculation, but you don't have the evidence to back it up. Here's the evidence to back it up. So this opinion will be stronger because of the empirical proof and evidence on the ground. So this is the first thing. We said the strongest evidence we must follow. So even when we're giving our zakat, like give directly, they are following certain type of evidence. And then number two, anfa, most beneficial to the poor. Based on the same Sayyidina Anas who I spoke, Sayyidina Mu'adh who I spoke about, the Qadi of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in Yemen, he goes and he tells the people, see, instead of giving wheat, please give your clothing, because this will be easier for you people and more beneficial to the Muhajirin and the immigrants in Medina. He understood the purpose and the value of zakah. So the objective was to benefit the poor people. So to benefit the poor people in Medina, they had wheat, they had plantation, they had all of these things. They had food, they needed clothes. Now here we would say, would give direct, people need money. So it will be according to the place, Let me give you an example of Sadaqatul Fitr. Some people will look at what's the minimum price. Oh, the minimum is 40 Rand in South Africa, example. But if a man is a multi-billionaire and he got 4 members, him, his wife, and his 2 kids, he wants to give 160 Rand. That's not the objective. He should not wait on flour and wheat. Maybe he should take dates. And dates come in different levels. So say we take a low class for 100 Rand, a middle class for 200, and a high class for 300. So he must calculate 300 times 3 kilos, it's 900 Rand. So his Zakatul Fitr will be 900, his wife's will be 900, and his 2 kids will also be 99. So he must give Zakatul Fitr 3,600 Rand and not 160 Rand. Because there's an objective where the rich people benefit the poor people. Now in that same way, we have our society, our organization. For us in South Africa, in Cape Town, where our area is, people are doing so much drugs. Statistically, based on our studies, we have to give them food because they don't worry about utilizing the money correctly. But when Give Direct done their research, they found people are using the money beneficially. They are empowering themselves. They are growing. They are getting stronger. So their money will be beneficial. Sharum Bulali said, if there is food in excess, money is always better. Like how Sayyidina Mu'adh done, where he saw clothes was better. So whatever is beneficial. So I hope this will create some space for us for scholars to create more tools that we can build financial institutions or financial stability for our Muslims. Not even institutions, but stability. And I would support and I would say to all the listeners, give directly so they can have an impact. And I hope that this brief discussion gave us some insight how the Quran and the Sunnah is used as evidence and gives us opportunities to work forward, inshallah. Shukran.
Shukran so much, Harun. If there are any questions, please send them to the Muslim Network for Positive Impact account and they'll be answered in the Q&A session. But now we'll move straight on to Walid from GiveDirectly. I think he's based in Toronto, to speak about the effectiveness behind unconditional cash transfers.
Yes, assalamu alaikum everyone, and thank you both Ahmed for organizing the event and Mufti Haroon for a really strong grounding, I think, in the theological reasoning behind effective zakat. That is not my area of expertise, so I'm really glad that he established this with a strong base of knowledge there. And I'll be sharing a presentation on what some of the global development literature says on cash transfers, what we do at GiveDirectly, and then specifically what we're doing in Yemen. And so I'm just going to share my screen. Great. Ahmed, can I get a quick thumbs up if you can see it? Great. Perfect. So I'm joined here by Mohammed Ghazi from our Yemen team. Before we dive in, Ghazi, do you wanna introduce yourself quickly?
Thank you, Walid, everyone. Hi, this is Ghazi. My name is Mohammed Ghazi. I am the program manager for GiveDirectly office here in Yemen. I am based in Aden, Yemen, and I'm so happy to talk to everyone. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ghazi. And my name is Walid. As Ahmed mentioned, I'm based in Toronto, and I'm on the growth team here at GiveDirectly. Essentially, what I do is I speak to different communities interested in direct giving to talk more about what GiveDirectly does and the effectiveness of cash. So today, we're going to try to answer 3 key questions. The first one being why cash, the second one being why GiveDirectly, and the third one being why we launched a program in Yemen and why we chose Yemen for our first zakat fund. And that is when Ghazi will come in and take things over for me. I'd like to begin just by showing this chart. I think it'll really help ground the discussion on cash and the central reasoning for GiveDirectly. And so if you look at this chart, the dark blue line is the cost of closing the poverty gap globally. And so what that means is if you take everyone in the world living in extreme poverty, so that's around 700 million people today, I believe, and you measure how far each of them is from the extreme poverty line of $2.15 a day, the cost of lifting all of those people mathematically to the extreme poverty line is about $100 billion today. That's the cost of closing the global poverty gap. On the other hand, if you look at the light blue line, that is how much the world spends on foreign aid each year. So that's transfers from high-income countries to the developing world intended at helping the poor. And that number was roughly 186 billion in 2021. So now significantly larger than the cost of closing the poverty gap. And this has been true for the last 20 years, where we actually have more money that we spend on global aid, and I'm not talking about money spent on philanthropy within rich countries or other types of charity. I mean, specifically on global aid over the past 20 years has surpassed the amount of the global poverty gap. And so then you might think, why have we spent trillions and trillions of dollars and we still see so much extreme poverty around the world? And this is an oversimplification, but one way to think about it is through kind of this simple illustration. So consider essentially the basis of philanthropy. The core philanthropic problem is that as a donor, you want to help in the most effective way possible. You want to help somebody living in poverty, and you have so many different options in how you do that. You can build a house, you can give them food, you can buy them a cow, you can give them job training. And everyone has a different idea on what they think is going to work best for recipients. Now, these usually have really good intentions, but the issue is they don't always match with what recipients really need. And there is kind of a fundamental misallocation of resources in the global aid space between what people need and what the global aid community is providing. And that is where we end up in a situation like this one, where we're spending much more money than mathematically the cost of closing the poverty gap, even though we have the resources with today's technology to send cash transfers at scale around the world. And so let's consider a slightly different model, which is instead of trying to guess at what people need the most, in many cases, we can send cash directly to people in poverty and let them decide how to spend it. And with today's technology, we can do this at scale quite efficiently, actually. And once people have the money, they can decide whether they want to prioritize sending their kid to school or buying food or buying medicine, because everybody has different challenges and different needs in life. And even in some of the poorest places in the world, there are functioning markets where people can take that cash and then spend it on what they need the most. Of course, there are exceptions. In areas where there is no food, for example, you can't provide cash to provide food security. But in most parts of the world, including Yemen, we actually do see functioning markets where people can buy all of these things. And so this is not just not just intuitive, but it's actually well documented in the literature on global development. And so cash has been quite well proven over the past few decades, and has the largest evidence base of any anti-poverty tool. It's been studied more than any other type of intervention. There are more than 315 rigorous experimental studies, what are called RCTs, or randomized control trials, where you measure very scientifically the impact on a group who receives one kind of intervention against a control group. And there are more than 315 of these on cash. And that's roughly 2 times the next most studied intervention, which is microfinance. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but GiveDirectly does a lot of its own research as well. We've done 20 of these RCTs on our programs, partnering with independent academics and researchers who do the evaluation. And so what does this large evidence base tell us? What do all these studies tell us? And to summarize, I think the really interesting thing about cash is that it can drive positive results across a wide variety of outcomes. It's very multifaceted in a way that's quite unique. Quickly go through some of the examples. The strongest effect is on income and assets, even up to 10 years later. So the longest study we have on cash is 12 years long, and it shows that a single transfer of a few $100s to someone living in extreme poverty, 10 years later, when you measure that person's income and assets against a control group, there was a noticeable difference. And that's because when people receive the cash, they make productive investments, they make improvements in their life on goods that are going to last them a long time, and on productive investments that are going to help them generate more income later. And I'll dive a little bit more into this in a second. But it's not just on income and assets. We've found that cash in different contexts can lead to improved food security, business ownership and entrepreneurship, school enrollment, gender equity, and Ghazi later will be going through some recipient stories to show how diverse these outcomes can be. And then on the other side, there is a lot of research that shows cash can decrease a lot of bad things like mental health problems, domestic violence, alcohol and drug consumption, child mortality, and skipped meals. And I'll be diving a little bit into one of those in a second as well. So on the income piece, I quickly wanted to show this, this chart from one of the most long-term studies we have on cash. And so if you look at that horizontal red line, I believe, that is the amount of the initial grant that recipients receive. It was about $380. And then the dotted lines are how much income gains people generated after receiving their cash transfer, again, because they made a productive investment. And you can see it around the 3-year mark, those 2 lines intersect. And after the 3-year mark, all those income gains had actually surpassed the original cost of the grant. And that basically tells us that cash pays for itself just in terms of income gains alone. And remember, income gains are only one of the benefits of cash. This population might not have just paid for the cash transfers itself, essentially, but they're probably also healthier. They're more likely to have their children in school and experience some of these other outcomes. And then I quickly wanted to close off on just other key takeaways from GiveDirectly's research and the cash transfer literature base in general. The first one is that on a systematic basis, there's no evidence that cash leads to bad stuff. Of course, that doesn't mean that every single person who receives a cash transfer will use it wisely, but it does tell us, by and large, when you study this on scale, people use the money well. And the most common, I think, thing that people ask when I tell them about GiveDirectly does is, oh, won't people just waste the money? Won't they go buy cigarettes or alcohol or drugs? And I think that's not something supported by the literature. And I think the largest study we have is from the World Bank, who did a evaluation of 19 programs across Africa, South America, and Asia, looking at cash transfer programs intended to help the poor. And they did not find that cash in any systemic way increased consumption of alcohol and drugs. And in some cases, actually decreased it as it lifted people out of poverty. Next, this is the point of cash being multifaceted. It's really the only intervention that has the flexibility to meet diverse or multiple needs. Other interventions might be effective, but food is only going to help drive better nutritional outcomes primarily, right? Other interventions are focused on a specific thing, but cash can let you drive a lot of different outcomes because it has the flexibility to meet different needs or a diverse set of needs. Third is that cash is versatile across different contexts. And what I mean by that is very few interventions can help people in poverty really across the world. At GiveDirectly, we have programs in the US and we have programs in Yemen. And then we have programs in 14 countries. We've run programs in 14 countries in total. And cash is so flexible that you can apply it to different contexts and apply it in different ways depending on what you want to accomplish. A few more I'll quickly go through. Cash, we found in our research, can outperform other interventions. And of course, this isn't always true. Cash isn't a silver bullet. You still need other interventions to solve a variety of issues. But we've done benchmarking studies where we compare cash to another program, and we work with independent researchers. A few of these were with the U.S. Development Agency, USAID. And we found that cash can actually outperform other interventions that people typically think are more effective. So, for example, job training. We compared cash to a very well-known job training program in Rwanda. I can send that out as a follow-up, but we found on a cost-adjusted basis, cash was actually more effective. And 2 years later, people who received cash actually had double the incomes of people who had received job training. And job training, by and large, while it can be effective, I think over the past 2 decades, a lot of the literature that's come out shows that it doesn't lead to as quite long-term effects as we originally expected. And it really only can be effective in specific contexts. And then finally, and this is, I think, one of my favorite key takeaways, is that cash can stimulate the economy and really benefit surrounding communities. So our most recent study showed that there's a 2.5x economic multiplier from cash. And what that means is if you put $1 into the economy, it's going to increase GDP or economic growth by $2.50. Because if I give Ahmed a cash transfer and he owns a shop, he's going to buy goods from his shop for another merchant. And that merchant might go spend that money on a haircut. And then the barber is going to spend the money to put their kids to school. And so that money stays in the community and leads to more economic growth and benefiting not just the people who receive the money, but also the people in the surrounding community. So that's it on why cash. And now I want to talk a little bit about GiveDirectly and why we're well positioned to be delivering cash in Yemen. GiveDirectly does just one thing. This is our core model, unconditional cash transfers. And we let donors from different parts of the world send cash directly to people in extreme poverty. We've been operating for about a decade, and in that time, I've delivered more than $650 million to more than 1.5 million people in 14 countries. And we've run more than 20 studies on these programs, including the largest basic income study in the world currently taking place in Kenya, which is going to be another 12-year study. In 2020, we grew significantly because of how much money was directed to cash transfer programs during the pandemic. And so in 2020, we were actually the fastest growing NGO in the world, and have seen quite a lot of success both with individual communities and with institutional funders like the World Bank and USAID, etc. One thing I think that makes GiveDirectly quite unique is we're both a research and implementation organization, which is actually quite rare in the NGO space. And you have NGOs who do a good job implementing programs, and then you have NGOs who do a good job researching programs and doing evaluations. GiveDirectly is kind of unique in the sense that we do both. We both implement our own programs and commission research with independent researchers to continuously iterate and improve our programs. And in total, we've done around 20 of these, testing the effectiveness of cash in different contexts. And finally, we have developed a lot of experience doing this in different countries. So 2022, we reached recipients in 11 countries. That 14 number I provided before was for our all-time countries reached. This is just for 2022. And you can see that point of how cash can really be so effective in really diverse environments. Here we have different parts of Africa, North Africa, East Africa, West Africa. We have Yemen, we have the USA. And on that note, I will pass it off to Ghazi to talk about our Yemen program.
Thank you, Walid. Everyone, I'll just talk here more about GiveDirectly in Yemen and the pilot project that is being conducted currently in Aden Governorate in Yemen. And I am going also to talk more about the activities, targeting process, the stakeholder, and also presenting to you some on-ground stories showing the impact of what GiveDirectly is doing in Yemen. Allow me to start my presentation with a small video, if that can be played. Walid, yes, thank you.
Are people able to hear the video?
Crisis in the world.
What's going on in Yemen right now? It's
okay. I'm not super sure how we can make sure the video is heard, and I'm realizing we only have 15 minutes. So Ghazi, maybe you dive right into the next slide, and then we can answer questions and send the video after, if that works.
Yeah, totally. Sure. Thank you. Just start very briefly about Yemen. Since the conflict started in 2012 and escalated in 2015, Aden Governorate becomes one of the governorate host a lot of internal displaced people who came from different governorate and different directions to Aden, because it's considered after the conflict as the capital or the tentative capital for Yemen until the conflict's over. GiveDirectly actually launched operation and the pilot project in late 2020s. That was in August, and that was by signing a principal agreement with the Yemeni government, and also sub-agreements with the relevant ministries like Ministry of Social Labor and Ministry of International Cooperation in Yemen. Also, GiveDirectly started by positioning and kicking off the humanitarian response after getting the permission and license. in Yemen, which was not the easiest thing ever, but that that's indicate to the importance and the impact of the cash transfers on the Yemeni society and the community, which also faced by a lot of facilitation from the governmental entities to kick off the project in Aden. The project is directly targeting two groups of people, the internal displaced people who came to Aden from different governorates, and also the host community, the low-income host community areas surrounding the IDP camps, the internal displaced people camps. So it was noticed by a number from the government and some of the humanitarian agencies that there was some intentional sensitivity created by some of the, or few of the humanitarian agencies by support one group and more than another, which was not helping. Here where GiveDirectly came up during the project designing with also some governmental discussion, and agreed to target 50% of the recipients from the host community and 50% of the recipients from the IDPs. In 5 districts in Aden Governorate, which also support and enhance the community cohesion in those 5 districts. GiveDirectly pilot project in Aden now, targeting 4,200 recipients. Currently, we reached to 2,000 households plus, and GiveDirectly team contains of almost 20 on-ground field team members. And we are conducting this project in cooperation with a number of stakeholders like governmental agencies, relevant ministries, UN agencies like clusters, food security cluster and camp coordination management cluster, peer INGOs who are doing also cash transfers and other humanitarian activities, district offices and directors from the targeted districts, community committee groups which have been formed previously and has been added also depending on GiveDirectly recommendations. And we are also working with the IDP executive unit, which is the relevant governmental entities for the internal displaced people. Next, please, Walid. Okay, how we are targeting how we are delivering the cash to the IDPs and the host community. In really simple way, 3 main steps: target, enroll, and pay. Target, as we are targeting 2 groups of people, so there is 2 pathways. Actually, the IDPs, we are in collaboration with the IDP executive unit, working on list generation and linking with the focal points who have presence in each camp in Aden. These camps are different from a demographical perspective. Some of it's like a core camp that includes 200 to 300 families from different areas. And some of it, it's more like a village than it's a camp. So you can find some of the host community and the internal displaced people are living, right side each other. So the IDPs, we are working with the executive unit, and for the host community, we are working first on identifying the neighborhoods by working with the social labor affairs and the district office, and also working with the sub-communities in each neighborhood. The enrollment, our GiveDirectly team is doing door-to-door enrollment process and auditing as well, collecting needed information and identification for the enrollment process. Then we are doing also a cross-check process, which include ensuring that none of the GD recipient is receiving in-kind cash assistance from different NGO. And then the last thing is payment. That is where GiveDirectly team is, welcoming the recipient when they came to the cashing out point after confirming the identification, facilitating the cashing out process to all the recipients. And something that we just start to test right now, which is depositing the payments into the recipient's account, which is showed also some positive feedback from the recipients, empowering them to cashing out the specific amount they need, and also keeping the rest of the money in a safe place. Next, please. Yeah, what does the cash mean to the Yemeni people in need? It's meant a lot. If I would say empowerment, choice, and also a life-changing, those are the three main words. How can I describe it? Just a quick brief about Eden City. Eden City is a coastal city. It's so hot, actually. I mean, the humidity right now, it's 77%. The temperature, it's 29 cellulose, which is equal to 48 Fahrenheit. The electricity rate, it's so hard. It's actually 2 hours on and then 5 hours off. So you can imagine Ramadan and living condition for the IDBs and the host community, which to most of them, for example, they are seeing a small fan. It's sufficient to a big AC in the impact. So if I would categorize most of the needs for the IDBs, I would say most in food, home goods, 95% they are living in a wooden tents. So the roof, electricity source, like a small solar panel, for example, some small electronics like fans, as I explained, it's very important. And also the health and medicines, as the whole medical situation in Eden, it's not the best. And we will explain that more when we will talk more about the stories. And for the host community, most of the needs is also about food, education, paying debt, and also kicking off and starting small businesses like a source of income. We will talk more now about some of the stories, distinguishing the differentiate of needs for every group of people. Next, please, Walid. We'll first talk about Noura, which is one of the host community families. Noura, she's 29 years old. Noura had the skills. Her mother actually taught her how to create traditional perfumes. It's a Yemeni traditional thing used by like basic raw materials. But the issue for her is that she didn't have the chance to actually kick off and start. She didn't have the resource to get her raw materials and start her small businesses. This is where GiveDirectly support, empower her to start and kick off her small businesses by getting income, let's say monthly income for her that cover her basic needs. Next, Walid. Yeah, Shuraiga, 30 years old. Shuraiga's main challenge was in securing good food quality and quantity to her and her 5 children. Shuraiga suffered from the malnutrition. Shuraiga, actually, she is an IDP, internal displaced people, and she came from Hudaydah Governorate. Hudaydah Governorate, it's more like 400 miles away from Eden. So she suffered a lot to get to Eden. And once she was here, the IDP executive unit secured her a tent to live alongside with her children. And this is where GiveDirectly assistance and support allow her and empower her to have a good food quality. Next, Walid. Yeah, next we have Abdullah, 49 years old. He's also needed the money mostly for medicines. He's a diabetes. He said that he couldn't secure himself diabetes medicines. And this is one of the challenges actually here in the whole medicine or health system in Eden. For example, for the diabetes, insulin used to be sold in a very low cost and sometimes has been distributed freely. But because of the, commercial health system, now it's even being sold by higher cost. Sometimes the insulin, it's written that it's for freely distributed, but although people are going to pharmacies to buy it with an even higher cost. So Abdullah helped himself in securing for himself medicines for the diabetes, and also he get a motorcycle so he can work on it and secure some of the basic income for him and for his family. Just to end here, this is some of the individuals' story that we can talk about, but there is also some examples, not individually, on a community level. For example, some of the stories, one of the IDP's camps used to have like an open sewage channel, and by contribution, by number of our recipients, they like a community contribution to cover it up, which will increase the health condition of the camp to everyone. Also, another camp, they opened a small education class for children with like a teaching contribution from themselves to continue the education and not hold it at the end, to the end. Also, some of the host community stories, like especially the women, like starting small businesses, like Noura, we talked about, working on creating perfumes, working on sewing, buying some goats, livestock, buying some electronics, working on solar, as I mentioned. And the last example that we were targeting an IDP camp. This camp has been relocated by the government, although the GiveDirectly payment has been arrived to the internal displaced people 4 days after the relocation, which helped them a lot in providing most of the non-food items that they need prior to Ramadan. That's all from my side, and back to you, Walid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ghazi. You know, I can show you charts all day, but I find that actually telling people stories can be the best way to explain how helpful cash can be in terms of meeting people's different needs. So thank you for sharing. I know we're over time. I'm just going to spend 1 more minute explaining why we launched the Zakat Fund, and then I'll pass it back over to you, Ahmed. So why launch a Zakat Fund in Yemen? 1, because there's tremendous need, but 2, because it was a unique opportunity for us to reach almost an entirely Muslim population. We work in other programs where in Nigeria, for example, in Kenya, where we have a lot of Muslim recipients, but it's difficult for us to guarantee that all of the recipients are going to be Muslim. But we can guarantee that in Yemen, and hence we can make sure that it was a Zakat eligible program. And as Muhammad has been talking about, this is already an established, proven program. And so we wanted to provide Muslims with an opportunity to give to an effective evidence-backed giving option in cash transfers to Yemen. And then a few notes quickly on how it works. We had to go through a certification process with, we used a Sharia advisory firm called Amana Advisors, who did a detailed audit of our process, helped us write a Zakat policy to make sure everything was aligned with Islamic law. And then we implemented a 100% cash policy for Zakat. So every $1 in donations leads to exactly $1 in cash delivered to families in need. I think this is quite rare in the NGO space because NGOs are always going to have costs of delivery. GiveDirectly, typically with donations, we do take a percentage for the cost of delivery. We're pretty efficient. It's usually 10 to 15% is our cost of delivery. But for this Zakat fund, our cost of delivery is covered by completely separate funds. And so no Zakat dollars are used to cover Zakat. It's the equivalent of whatever amount you donate. It's like you handed it directly to the family in need. And I think this was something that we decided to pursue because we wanted to make sure we were being as a secular organization to be as aligned with different Zakat certification requirements, so Muslims can really have high confidence in where they're giving. And that's all I had for today. I'll pass it back to Ahmed. I know we went way over, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to stay back a little bit to chat. So.
No, thank you so much, Walid and Ghazi, for that very thorough presentation. It's generated a lot of questions and we received a lot of compliments as well. I'm just going to start with some questions. I'm going to start with a question that perhaps both Walid and Ghazi can speak to, because I know Ghazi might have to break for iftar in Yemen soon. There's a question here. I've seen some charities claim that giving cash is not an effective solution in areas where markets are particularly unreliable and or volatile, and recipients who struggle to purchase supplies, often citing Yemen as an example. What is GiveDirectly's experience been? I'm just going to send that question in the chat if you want to read it.
Yeah, I can speak generally, but I think, Ghazi, you can speak better to the Yemen context. I think in general, people underestimate how well markets function, even in some of the most challenging environments in the world. That doesn't mean that everywhere cash is going to work. But in Yemen, I think we have found that there are functioning markets. Ghazi, do you want to comment on that at all? Do you see significant challenges with recipients not able to buy what they need, or?
Yes, Walid. Thank you. Well, actually, no, I might, based on the experience we have, we most of the cases we face that they have, the cash transfers promote them to have the choice to have plan A, plan B, plan C, especially when we explain to them the amount and when they can expect it. So they have a better planning position for their entitlements. And so far here in Yemen, specifically in Aden, the market, the banking market, there is more than one options and solution. And as I mentioned, we are keep testing the new methodologies and models, like deposit into a bank account, for example, for the recipients. That's also promote them to cashing out the specific amount they need, and cashing out process as itself. We also had a good positive feedback from the recipients. It's not hard for them. Spending the money as Yemen, as Aden, I said, it's more than a city, like than a village. So market, it's there, and it's all the recipients have the access to it.
Yeah, and in general, I think whenever there are markets, cash is always going to be more efficient than in-kind aid. Like, I think NGOs should be doing much less in-kind aid, I think, globally, because it just costs so much money to ship food, all of the logistics behind it, when it can just be purchased in a domestic market.
All right, and then there's some questions that were answered later in the presentation, such as how much of Zakat donations are using admin expenses, or maybe it's not. So as far as I understand from the presentation, GiveDirectly doesn't spend any Zakat any of the Zakat donations on admin expenses. But that first question is regarding usually what's the case.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Usually, what is the?
Yeah, I placed in the chat as well. So maybe not GiveDirectly, but usually how much of Zakat donations are connected to admin expenses?
I see. It really varies by the charity. I think a lot of places will say upfront that they have a 10 to 15% overhead fee for Zakat, or an admin fee, which isn't too bad when you think about it. If you're thinking 85 to 90% of my Zakat is reaching the recipient, that's not too bad. But the tricky part is, and why you should always be careful with nonprofit finances, is because overhead is kind of a made-up metric, and you can call something a program expense, even though it is not really directly reaching the recipient. And the example that I'll give there is, if somebody says they have a 10% admin fee for overhead and 90% reaches the program, but their program is they're actually like delivering food, right? What can you put into that 90%? You can put in the salaries of everyone involved. You can put in the cost of the truck. You can put in the cost of the fuel. You can put in all kinds of costs that you can call program costs, because they're part of the direct program delivery. But at the end of the day, not a lot will reach the recipient. And in some cases, it's the cost can be as high as 30 to 50% with some of the larger NGOs. Another challenging thing is a lot of programs will sub-grant. And so if I'm a charity with a 90% with a 10% overhead, and I say 90% goes to programs, but I subgrant to another charity to actually do the work on the ground, and they also have 90% efficiency, who then subgrants to another charity at 90% efficiency, you can see how very quickly, even if everybody's operating at 90% efficient, you can get down to some very low efficiency numbers because everyone is taking a cut along the way. And this is actually much, much more prevalent than you would expect. Like there's so many layers of intermediaries in the global aid space.
And then a question for Mufti Harun that came before the session. There was a post recently on the EA forum on this GiveDirectly's initiative, and it generated a whole discussion about whether Zakat can be given to non-Muslims as well. So could we allocate our Zakat funds to GiveDirectly's programs anywhere else in the world? Could Mufti Harun give an understanding of what the opinions around that?
As Walid mentioned, with GiveDirect, first I want to just touch on what Walid was speaking about the previous question. I think Walid said in their program of GiveDirect, 100% of your zakat is going to the recipient, right? And all other expense, admin expense, upfront, 10 or 15%, that comes from other donations, from Lillah money or whatever it is, but it's not taken from the zakat. So that's number one. So when Walid was answering, I think he was answering on other NGOs, right? And for GiveDirect, the reason he chose Yemen is to guarantee that all your zakat money is going to Muslims, to majority Muslim recipients. In other places, they use the Lillah money or the other charity, Sadaqah, for the non-Muslims, and they still use the zakah for Muslims. But just to secure zakah money and put confidence in the believers or in Muslims, they give it in Yemen because it's majority Muslims. I think that's what I understood, right? From a Sharia perspective is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of different types of charities for Muslims and non-Muslims. But when it comes to zakat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it's for the believers. It's to empower the Muslim community. So for the poor believers and for all the 8 categories, right? So it's mainly for the believers. There's not much difference of opinion. There may be a 1% of people who would say that it can be given to non-Muslims, but that could be argued that there is other philanthropy work, there is other people who are giving money, what can be used for non-Muslims. And because this is an ibadah and part of the pillars of Islam, so it should be for Muslims to Muslims. Allah knows best.
Shukran for that, Mufti.
Ahmed, you muted yourself before you started speaking.
I'm just trying to find this question a bit further
Okay.
up. Oh, yes. How does giving money in one lump sum versus consistent regular payments over a longer term change the impacts?
Yeah, let me circulate that as a follow-up. We recently did a pretty detailed overview of this. Broadly, different people actually prefer it in different ways. If you want to enhance for productive investment, if you want to give people the ability to like fix their house or invest in a business, or kind of put the money to work, you should give them more money up front. You should give them a lump sum, which is GiveDirectly's more typical model. And that model is best for encouraging investment and usually better for younger people. If you do recurring payments or basic income payments, so giving it month by month, there are benefits to that. For example, if you're trying to solve for food security, then doing monthly payments is better because people have the predictability of knowing when the next transfer is going to come in. And that's better generally for older populations or in contexts where food security is an issue. So it's not that one is better than the other. They just have different effects depending on what outcomes you're trying to optimize for.
Thanks for that. And then there's another question here. As we are running out of time, I'll put 5 more minutes left for questions. If there are any questions, you can send them through now. This is how effective has governmental foreign aid, especially from other Arab countries, been in Yemen?
I honestly don't know about Yemen particularly. Ghazi, do you want to speak in general, like what you've been seeing on the ground of how has Yemen been getting a lot of aid from other Arab countries? Has it been effective?
Yeah, thanks, Walid. I would say, yeah, of course, there is another governmental, foreign aid from the Arab countries, especially like Saudi Arabia and Emirates. There is an effective program here in Yemen generally, and specifically here in Aden and different governorate, called King Salman Foundation, which is more, they are doing support, but it's not like a regular support on a monthly base. Some of the projects mainly are focused on the infrastructure of the city, like working on roads, reconstruction of some of the buildings. Some of the governmental buildings has been damaged of the war. So they are working on that. And also there is some like minimum monthly food basket just to be distributed one time, for example, in Ramadan or in any other ceremonies. Unfortunately, there is no ongoing sustainable support, especially for the cash transfers. Yes, there is some food activities and as I say, some other infrastructure activities. For example, rehabilitating of Aden International Airport, which supported the Yemeni people overall, because it's one of the few ports we have on the world. That's mainly, but there is no like unsustainable ongoing projects or programs. Although they are supporting some of the UN agencies like WFP, doing some of the cash transfers, and also supporting number of local organizations here and there where they don't have an access on. Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna just put one final question. This question is, I'm from Egypt and I'm a socioeconomic researcher who conducts RCT. How can we help you? And perhaps GiveDirectly can just give general advice also on, aside from donating to the Zakat fund, how else does GiveDirectly need support?
Yeah, I think honestly, one thing is we're always looking for smart, passionate people who believe in this approach to charity. So I would say a few things, like keep your eye out on GiveDirectly social media or job board for opportunities to get involved. Sometimes there's different roles that we're hiring for. Sometimes there's more ad hoc engagement opportunities. I think second is spread the word about cash. I think a lot of people still have misconceptions about cash, and they think, won't people just waste the money, right? And then they ignore all of the evidence behind this and the tremendous amount of good it could do around the world if we can continue scaling this. So spread the word about cash. And third, I think, is just encourage your friends to think effectively about their Zakat this Ramadan. It doesn't have to be GiveDirectly. There's other effective options. But I think too many people will just give to a charity because it's a big name and people in their community talk about it. But it might not actually be the best use of their funds. So it's important to have those conversations.
Right. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Apologies for questions I didn't get to. We are way over time. Yeah, is there any way if people have more questions, they can get in contact? We will be sending out an email with all the links, and we'll send some contact details there as well, actually, if anyone has more questions. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to our speakers for taking the time out to be here. We really, really appreciate it. To Mufti Harun, Walid, and Ghazi, and to all our attendees for coming. Alhamdulillah, I think it was a good turnout for our first event. And we plan to upload the recording, so we'll send that in the email as well, inshallah.
Thanks so much.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
See. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.